Luca Nation. This is going to be an episode where I'm glad it's coming out on the weekend because if one, it shows that we work overtime, but two, it shows our listeners that are going to be the first ones tuning in. They're going to get some scoops. They're going to get what I think is one of the undiscovered gems in the hobby. Let me make it clear. This guy is well known, well respected, but for the amount of work you put in, for the amount of value you add, man, I think what you're doing is in its infancy compared to the potential. And getting to know you, you're the guide to make it happen, in my opinion. So, guys, this is a must follow. A lot of you guys already follow him because I've referenced Gem Rate, but a lot of what Cage and I do, and a lot of other podcasts do, is anecdotally we see things happening in the market, but we can't necessarily put data or numbers or analytics to it. The gentleman sitting across from me, not my handsome co-host, is the one who puts data, numbers, analytics, interpretations on top of some of the more anecdotal stuff we have. So it's truly a pleasure, Ryan. I'm a big fan of yours. I don't follow a lot of people in the hobby. Yours is like one of those I click like the bell. I added you to close friends. I was like, I need this stuff because this really allows me to build a whole thesis on what's happening in the hobby, not just kind of, emotionally, I feel this or I feel that. So Gem Rate on Instagram, make sure to follow them and stay tuned to this episode because you guys, there's going to be a lot of nuggets here. So Ryan, welcome to Lucas Tigers and Bronze. Oh my. Show.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it. A big fan, long-time listener. Excited to just dive in and talk about all the things. You guys have been covering a lot of the grading activity. Hopefully I can shed some more light on that and we can go in sort of any direction here. But yeah, I'm excited to be on.
You're no days off these guys too, by the way.
Undiscovered gem. You like what Andrew did there, right? Undiscovered gem.
Oh yeah, I
in the
caught
hobby.
that.
I mean, hey now, I don't even know if he does these things on purpose.
It was accidental.
Yeah, see, that's. I mean, I never know. I never know if he's an accidental genius or am I not giving him enough credit all the time here?
I was born in today's era. I don't care about my strikeouts. I'm just gonna swing and hit a few home runs.
I was pitching a wiffle ball to Ian yesterday, and a guy walked by, not as old as me, but definitely not young, and he's like, just swing level swing, base hits. And I'm like, get out of here. That's not what they're teaching kids today. It's a launch angle. I'm trying to teach him pop-ups, get it deep enough, get it in the air and home run, get it in the air or swing and miss. It's completely analytics now. Get out of here with that level swing Ty Cobb crap.
Cage, what you wanted to know though was, So Ryan's been running Gem Rate every single day, building API tool to scrape data from different grading companies all over the internet. And you wanted to ask, how are you doing this every day? So I think you want to hear the origin story a little bit more than I do today.
I do. And I wanted to guess the origin story, right? So, I mean, normally we spend a couple of minutes with, folks right before we get them on, just kind of, get a feel. I'll know how far I can push somebody. It's usually the only reason why we do it. If they're sensitive the first couple of minutes, I take it easy. But, we try to get feel. And we started actually talking about, the business and Gem Rate and how much work goes into it. Basically a one-man band here in Ryan. And, we definitely want to talk about what you're doing and all that fun stuff. But, you work on this a lot. And look, just to be honest and transparent, I would love to work on the hobby 24 hours a day. I don't know what the hell I would build if I had 24 hours a day to build this. Probably nothing, probably Legos. But I would buy more cards and sell more cards and I would do more because it's a hobby that's become something that you can make money on. There are businesses, there's all this cool stuff. And I had the gumption to ask Ryan how he's able to do this because it's not generating probably enough to survive on yet. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it's going to get bought out. I'm sure it's going to get crazy money. And investors, possibly you. I want to be involved in this. I definitely do. But we were asking, all right. So what the hell? How'd this happen? You're a tech guy, so I just assumed this. And Ryan made a joke about how he's been a listener since the beginning, and he just made all his money on Tyler Hero plays from Andrew. And I was going to make a joke, of course, if you watch this on YouTube, that maybe Ryan invented. That thing that you see on TV, that the perfect shave your head bald, you don't even see any hair at all, I'm like, maybe he invented that. I don't know, because he's got a clean do he's got going on there. So, but
I appreciate that.
I mean, I'm imagining you exited some company, you've already taken some company public, or you did some kind of tech stuff, and now you're able to basically build something that I think the hobby, once it's completely rolled out, what you're trying to do, we'll look back and say, how the hell were we doing what we were doing without this? It's that kind of a tech.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. So you're pretty close. I did not create that device, so I could still use that. So if there is one that comes on market, sign me up. But no, yeah. So I worked at a tech and media startup in New York called The Skim. It's not a huge company by any means.
Nice.
a tech standpoint, but it's, it's venture backed, and I had a very like modest exit from there, where, the founders sort of like carved out a little bit of room for me just to bet on myself. And so it gave me like a couple year window where I worked for them as sort of the head of growth and analytics, but I wanted to really get into the technical side of it, like push myself out of my comfort zone as far as I could. And so I actually was working on a stock project. I was using Google Trends data to resurface or sort of repurpose it to help make investment decisions. And I was working on that for a little while. And then I just got caught up in the card craze like everybody. I had been, I'm no different than everybody else that jumped back in. The only thing that was a little different is I did a lot of daily fantasy sports. So I was huge on like DraftKings. I was big on FanDuel. I actually had a big hit on DraftKings too in that period of time, which sort of built a little bit more of a buffer for me. I won 100K in a DraftKings contest. And so that kind of like covered some of my rent and, took care of some of the bills.
Ryan, my Uncle Sam's not listening to this episode right now. So
I paid.
all good.
I paid. I sure did. They take a nice healthy 40% of that. And I certainly gave some of that back to the house too. But
and if you guys don't know, the Skim is kind of like a newsletter culture blog type of site. Kind of reminds me of
it basically
Morning Brew.
It was the Morning Brew before it existed, and I know the Morning Brew guys really well. And it was basically just like breaking down news in a way that was going to be relevant for female millennials. And so we grew it from like 200,000 to 7 million, and I was their first hire. And so it was like very early on. It was just about how do you get this really great product in front of as many people as possible. And that's what I had done for 5 years, did a little bit of consulting, and then I started to break off and do my own stuff. But I got caught up in going back to Generate. I got caught back up in this. I was already doing a lot of interesting things with data to try to understand the stock market, understand, daily fantasy sports, and sort of get as good of information as I could as quickly as possible, and sort of just have like some advantages there. And I said, I started getting the card stuff, and I was just so aggravated. I was like, everything still looks the same as it did 20 years ago. I said, I can't take it. Like, I cannot take going to another website that is full of ads and, can barely sort of be navigated. And so it was just like, it was very clear the paradigm had not shifted towards the, sort of the modern era. Everything had sort of gotten ahead of itself. And so everybody, though, I didn't want to be the, 17th pricing tool out in the market. And so I was like, I'm so sick of trying to understand, like, where should I grade my cards, and where's sort of the arbitrage in the sense of, somebody's more lenient here, or where are parallels graded differently, or, just what is the broader context of, 2019 sets and 2018 sets. And so I was just looking into it, and I just decided that it was time to sort of like, dig in and figure out where I could have an impact. And in the same process, I was just like, I can't believe there's no universal pop report. Like, that was the thing that was crushing me. It was like, I felt, as somebody who was new to the hobby, I felt like I was going down, all these wrong paths, being like, oh, population of 1, population of 10. And then I'd look and I'd be like, oh no, the context has just shifted. There's actually 100 other of these. It's just the market has shifted over time, and, everything has sort of evolved, but like, you need to be able to zoom out. And from a buyer standpoint, you're just disadvantaged. Everything's from the seller's perspective. From a convenience standpoint, you want things to look as scarce as possible. So everybody sort of rallies around like population reports being through the lens of just the grader, because it's to the advantage to make it seem as scarce as possible. And I was like, well, this is kind of bullshit. I want to be able to sort of give the buyers more information. And so that's why I've been just focused on, one was PSA, because that's where all the momentum was. And I just wanted to help tell that story. These have been sort of like, companies have been very protective of their data over time, and I wanted just to bring a little bit more transparency to this market, a little bit more accountability. And so I just started to dive in, and I'm 18 months into this journey, and I'm starting to get a lot of momentum on it, and it's been fun, but it's not sexy. I mean, like, the data is horrible to work with, but we've made a lot of traction and sort of structuring it and be able to combine it. So hopefully before the national, we can be live with this universal pop report in some fashion to help people just understand the broader perspective. So it's close.
And Ryan, it's just so that I can get a couple of questions on it. And guys, when I say, hey, investor is possibly you, we're having Ryan on because Andrew is a fan. I mean, Andrew's used this stuff. You've heard us talk about it a bunch of times. We don't just bring on people who, oh, wow, like sponsorship. We have no relationship with Ryan whatsoever. He's not giving us $1. We have not given him $1. It's just a cool thing that's being built out in the hobby. And unless I'm wrong, so I'll ask it in a couple questions, right? You're not working on pricing. Right? You're not working on valuations, right? You're not working on what a card is worth in a certain grade across different lines. And you're also not coming at this from, and by the way, if you're listening to this, he shook his head no. So the court transcript referenced that was a no answer to that one. If you watch it on YouTube, you got that answer, but there he goes. No. So no pricing involved in this whatsoever, right? The next question is, it's not coming at it from a gotcha standpoint. Like, you are not looking at this saying, okay, I sent in a couple thousand cards to PSA in 2019. I sent in a couple thousand cards to PSA in 2021, and all of a sudden my grades are terrible. I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. No, what you're doing is data, straight data, ugly data, right? Just data that is it's bulky, it's chunky, and you have no preconceived notion about what that data is going to show. You're just going to show what it shows, right?
That's right.
And what's cool about that, guys, at least from my standpoint, is everybody else is adding in or layering in some form of pricing to this. It's okay, so, well, in a PSA 10, this should be worth this. In a PSA 9, this should be worth this. And by the way, there's SGC 10s, and take a look at this, and this is what it's worth. And here's a comp, right? There is none of that. So without that, and tell me if I'm wrong here, you're the data guy, you also lose subjectivity. You also lose what Andrew talks about, whereas, well, if I'm the one putting the data in, I can make this card look rarer or look more valuable. You're not doing that. Your end game is not to say to somebody, use my tool because it'll give you a valuation of the card. Instead, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, and then I'll let you go. This is a typical Cage question. You're a listener, so you know how this thing goes. One question in 27 parts, like Dr. Philip Barbet. So the goal, I would think, would be, if you're an auction house, you have to be using this in your listings. If you're Heritage or you're Golden or you're PWCC, you list a card, you have to at some point say, here's gem rate, here's the universal pop report. It's PSA 10, which we're selling, there are 23 of these. Please note that in BGS 10, there's also this, BGS 9.5, there's this many, SGC 10, there's this many. That's the goal, I think, right?
I think your headphones died. I think his headphones died. Is that right? We'll
yes,
take a second.
His headphone dies. Well, normally I'm talking and we can't tell if he's talking or not, but now I know he's talking, but I can't hear him. We still can't hear you. This YouTube is going to be hilarious because he's still going.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you at all.
He'll fix it.
He's going to come back in. You understand what I'm saying, right? Andrew, you understand what I'm saying, right? Like this is different, right? Like all the other ones are I'm going to get to the pop reports so that I can show you this, right? All the other. So what we used it for was to say, okay, this is how many cards got graded, right? Okay, this is how many this company is grading. This is how many this company is grading. Look at how many more. And I think the value in this, especially with PSA closed for a year, is people went to other grading companies, right? So there are a lot of cards.
Right. This happens a lot. Don't even sweat it.
Don't worry about it.
No, I know. It's just too fitting. I mean, that's like the joke, is that's like the common thing. And of course, I set it up.
We had Gary V on, and during that episode, well, no, Cage had the most important call ever, because when family calls, you can't dodge it no matter who you're on, and he had to drop off, and that's like a big episode for us. So then it happens, and we do these every day, so our audience knows we try to bring it, even through adversity and all that stuff. So I admire
usually it's my Wi-Fi. It's my microwave that's blowing things up or something.
Well, I caught the gist of what was being asked there, and so I can sort of circle back to it. But yeah,
if you want, I'll do it again. It'll take another 10 minutes.
No. I think I got it.
Please don't.
I do want this to sort of be the hobby standard for population reports. Like, I don't want it to be through the lens of graders. I want this to be something that auction houses, marketplaces, collection management tools all use, because it's unopinionated, right? It's just, and I'm going and directly pulling this from pop reports. I'm not getting it through some special API access that the company controls. I'm just going and looking at the same thing that everybody else sees and pulling it in and telling the story for everybody else. And so, this is currently a very narrative driven hobby, and I want to provide more data. I think more data provides more confidence provides more transactions. And this data, I think right now, a lot of people use GemRate for big picture trends. They use it for like discovery, like, oh, I want to look at and sort of understand the Jordan Poole market. He's, blowing up. What does it look like today? Where could it go if I compare him to like Zion's populations? Because that's kind of like the addressable pop, right? That's helpful. But I also want people to be able to be on all these different marketplaces where they're making transactions. They're getting, they're building out their collections and saying, okay, I know this context of the full population. I can confidently jump in there and say, like, I'm not going to look back at this 2 weeks from now and be like, oh shit, why didn't I look at this? Or, you have the full data. The pricing is helpful. So no, I'm not doing anything with pricing, even though pricing would be great to have in this tool. I'm not trying to solve that. I'd like to partner down the line to sort of bring pricing into it to help people navigate it, but it's not my mission right now.
It keeps it pure. If you're not pricing a card, no one's going to say, okay, well, the pricing is wrong, or how you come up with the pricing, or where, like, the numbers you're using right now are straight objective, pure numbers. Nothing subjective, no outliers, no nothing like that, right? And obviously there'll be anomalies that you'll probably have to clean up, but the data is the data. So Andrew, I'll just one more question that I have, and then you can go ahead.
Before this episode, I knew that this is what you'd nerd out because I learned from you, and you talked about how PSA's registry is the number one thing.
Yeah.
That's what separates them. So I knew how important pop reports, supply, demand, and getting that data was. So go on with this.
Well, I mean,
fly on the wall learning.
This is less on that, and we'll get into the gem rate and what you can use it for. But what I've learned, and listen, I love the podcast. I love that we get to do this and we get to talk to so many people and so many people listen, because it allows me to ask questions that I would not otherwise get to ask. And what I've learned from people like Ryan, and maybe I'm dead wrong here. Maybe he's just a genius who had done, right? But like, look, even Whatnot, we sat down, we talked to the guys from Whatnot, right? And the Whatnot that we use today, which is an amazing app, is not what they started out trying to build. Mm-hmm. And most companies we sit down and talk to, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, okay, we got onto something and we changed it. We did this, this, and this. And almost everybody universally says that. So I guess my question with that as the backdrop is, when you came back in and you said, okay, I got to deep dive into this data, what was the problem you were solving for? And was it always this? Or did you think, you know what, I'm going to just do this, this, and this, and this universal pop report is kind of what came out of it? Or was this always you had the blinders on and this was always the goal?
I mean, the short answer is it was more about how do I like maximize my profits. I mean, that was sort of the short answer. It was like, I had jumped in and spent a ton of money on cards and breaks and all this stuff that I thought was super interesting, just like consuming as much as I could, trying to sort of catch up. And I was like, okay, now I've got to recoup my costs since everybody knows buying's easy, selling's hard. And so I was like, okay, how do you do that? Everybody was into the buy, grade, flip game. And so I was trying to figure out like, okay, I've got, these different cards that are grade worthy, but where do I send them? How do I factor in timing? All these different things. And so that was my pain point. It was painful just to pull that data together. And in that, I'm just like, I don't understand, one, why it's so painful to go to these pop reports on these sites and just navigate them as is. And then two, it's like, why do I have to go to these sites individually versus just having like one place that I can go and sort of see it all laid out for me? And so it wasn't that far removed from it, but it was really just about like, how do I maximize my return on my spend early on? And that was sort of the impetus for it.
I mean, it's a great answer. I mean, SGC is getting better, but to get Beckett, you have to like log in. Every single time I want to get a Beckett, I have to change my password because I forget what my login was. So it's like a whole process. I'm going to email myself. Oh, I changed my password. Cage lawyer 17. Cage lawyer 97. I figure it out, right? So everybody's got their own kind of different way of getting in. It's for the most part free. You know what I mean? But really, I envision a world, right, where all this money came in, the tech has to get better, right? Whether it's QR codes on everything or, like just ease of use, right? Because, I mean, there are apps coming out now that make it easier for my son to walk around a card show with a phone and say, okay, there are this many of this, this is worth this much. Here's what this card is. Here's why it's a different parallel than what I thought it was. Like all the stuff coming in. I think what you're doing is real high level stuff, right? Because as you said, narrative driven. Like I have a card that might be rare in PSA, but it's rare because it's a card that is old
Jordan
enough.
Fleer is a perfect example. Like I'm curious, data scientists look at trends and outliers. Is that fair or not?
Sure.
Were there any I have some outliers in my head. I remember we had KK Sports on, and he said the Soto Topps Chrome had a 97% gem rate or something like that.
93.
Yeah.
It probably comes down.
I mean, what were some outliers that you saw? What were some things you're like, the data came back and you're like, what?
It was like stuff that people now are very in tune with. I think what I was really early towards, like the hypers are like way undervalued relative to others in Prism, for example, because it was just like, they're such hard grades. And by like, not an order of magnitude, but by a nice discount, like they grade really poorly, or it's the shocks and optic and all these different things. I was trying to think about what parallels existed that were consistently undergraded, where the 10s should either be worth more because they're hard to get, or everything else, actually a 9 is almost a 10. And so maybe the 9s could appreciate over time. And I actually couldn't really get to a solid answer of like which ones were undervalued there, the 10s obviously, but there could have been a play on the 9s even. But it was stuff like that I looked at. I mean, I look at one of the things that I think is really cool for the future is like, I know every time a new, 86 Fleer pops 10 or a Jerry Rice pops 10 or like.
Without having to keep it open. Like I keep the Lewis Hamilton Futero one open on my browser. Yeah, I refresh it every day.
Every time
I hear another one.
Yeah. Right. And so like there's an alerting system that could play into this eventually over time. I'm trying to build an integration. So, if you want to manage these things in Google Sheets and Excel, you type in a Generate ID, you'll get a population updated every day. Like I want this to be integrated into what you're doing. I don't have sort of some ego and like you have to come to generate.com to get value. I want this to be where you're consuming and sort of finding joy in this hobby. And so, but it's all that stuff that's super fun. So it's like, that's why like it gets picked up by Sports Collector Daily and stuff, because it's some high level stuff there. And every time, there's some big picture trends, they pick it up. And some of these things are anomalies or not.
I got a question for you.
Hit me.
I'm wondering whether your proprietary blend, your secret sauce, your 7 herbs and spices, whatever we're going to use here today is going to be able to do something like this, right? I have a theory about a grading company that says these particular cards were graded one way in a certain time period, and in another time period, they're being graded a different way. For example, and just a hypothetical example here, folks, don't read anything into this at all. But let's say hypothetically, before everybody was jumping on, let's come up with one at random that is just some thin air. 1990 Marvel Impel. Let's just say a bunch of those are being submitted before everybody jumped all over the Marvel crap, right? And I want to look at what the gem rate of those were, or the 9s and 10s of those were, in, say, 2019, 2020, like it's 6-month or 12-month period, and then compare that to, say, the ones I got back last. I mean, ones that are being graded now, like backlog stuff, the whole deal. Like, I'd be curious if there's a
graded
way.
2019, graded now.
And is there a way to do that?
So, I mean, that's the goal, right? So I only have this data going back up until February 21, but that's the move going forward, is that you'll be able to go back and reference that data forever. But I can't go back into history when I wasn't collecting this. So you can still paint that, you can pull that data together in certain ways on the internet, but it's pretty hard to come by. But yes, that's the goal.
I have a hard time tying my own shoes.
And you can, I mentioned just to Andrew today with the post that I put out, like there's certainly opportunities if you go and target cards that were graded in March through June of last year, they're like severely undergraded because PSA was hiring new graders. They have this guarantee in place. They're incentivized to round down, not round up. Like, they have to, they're going to err on the side of being cautious as opposed to being aggressive, because now they're on the hook. And so when the market is looking at these cards and saying, wait a second, that's not a PSA 10, graders don't want to be held accountable for that. And then you also have this sort of like pop control conversation, which I don't think is a mandate by any means, but I think is a bias, which is they know the significance of these cards when they come across their desk. They're going to give those cards that are picking up momentum or, these iconic cards, they're just going to scrutinize them much more. And so I think PSA gets a little bit of an unfair shake in the sense of like, they're doing this on purpose. And I think the reality is it's just like a human behavior psychology thing, which is like, look, we brought on all these new people. It's a problem for us. They don't communicate much of that at all. People are sort of undergrading, and there's opportunities in that. And I think it's also unfortunate for the market if you just happen to have your cards graded in certain periods of time where people are getting ramped up and things are changing on their side, and there's some turnover, whatever that might be. You're subject to sort of just like what the machine gives you that day, and that's a little bit unfortunate because that might not be what you expected when you sent your cards in. So I think there's like some very interesting trends. I definitely think like that idea of going back and looking at cards and how things have changed. One, it gives you the story of like, okay, yeah, they're grading harder. That's good to know. Two, it's like, okay, maybe there's a period in the market where cards have been undergraded. Maybe you target those and you can pick those up at a discount and crack them or just whatever. There's potential there. But I think there's a lot of nuance to all this stuff.
Have you approached?
I think that's the first. I think there's going to be a lot of value. I think that's the first one. It's look. So today's post, if you guys look on GemRate, it shows the PSA 10s over time, right? And what is it? January 2020, there was a 51% gem rate on basketball, and now it's down to 24%, for example. So you could track that and see, oh, it's in the last year and a half, the cards that are graded, and you could figure out, deduce which serial numbers those are. Those might be overgraded, and if you took them, cracked them, and sent them to SGC, BGS, SCSG, you might be able to get on a 6, a 9, not anecdotal, not data driven, but something like that. Is that fair?
Totally. I think that's a big opportunity there. And in general, I just think it's important. I mean, I'm still very cautious about sending cards to PSA because I'm still trying to wait for things to normalize. Like, I watch this data, I'm just like, I don't know what I'm going to get. I don't know what I'm sort of subject to on the other end of this. And I think they're doing a lot of great things. building up the staff and sort of,
Yeah.
increasing capacity, but I think it comes with hiccups. And I think it's hard as a consumer to sort of have full confidence in that, though. When
Well,
you're
25 minutes in, let's just ask that right away, and then I have a bunch of other questions. Based on what you've seen, data, top line, you're saying you don't want to send your cards in because of what?
there's just too much risk. I don't know what to expect on the other end of it.
So inconsistency.
Yep.
You can't predict it. And you're looking at all the data, and obviously the goal of data is predictability. And what you're seeing is the data showing you that it's unpredictable.
I would say it's definitely inconsistent. I don't know and again, it's hard to know from the outside looking in sort of why, some of that might just be, this analysis I put out today, I was trying to isolate things to control for things so that it's, as fair as possible, but there's still things I don't know. And it could be seasonality and all these other things. But yes, the short answer is there's been some inconsistency there, and it kind of sucks. And you don't hear much from them about it. And so I'm hoping that GemRate can at least bring some data to it. So it's not just here's my PSA reveal, here's your PSA reveal, here's an aggregate how things are looking. And look, it's a little bit of a murky story. And I'm hoping this sort of just continues to shine some light on we need more transparency in this hobby. We need more accountability.
Well, I always try to put myself in the seat of a listener. Sometimes that's, on a bench press. Sometimes that's in their car. We've been told sometimes it's people doing number two. But I imagine somebody sitting there now listening to us saying, hey, you got to ask. All right, I'll ask. Have you approached any of the grading companies to get their data from them? Is that something you'd want? If you have they told you no? I know you kind of started off by saying if you got their APIs, you would get what they want to share rather than the clean data that everybody else is getting. But I would imagine that you'd have quicker access to more data as far as historical data. And you probably would be able to, depending upon what their data showed, how many levels there are to it, whether or not this was submitted in an economy sub, a value sub, a bulk sub, whether it's a backlog card or not, which would allow you to really come up with some cool graphs, some cool content to say, all right, this same card, if it was part of a $10 value sub, it has a 12% gem rate as opposed to when it's at $50, it's got a 50%. Like that kind of stuff would be really useful, I would think. And I'd be curious, have you approached anybody?
So I've definitely talked to all the companies in the sense that, they either, like what I'm doing and they sign up for the newsletter that I send out once or twice a month. They follow what we're doing on social. Occasionally they'll ping me and just be like, hey, there's discrepancies in what you're putting out versus what we see internally. Can you help us?
Okay, that's good.
And it is good. I like that. That's all partially why I'm a little bit skeptical in the sense
that I don't
really
want them
giving me numbers that look different because GemRate stands for accountability, transparency, explainability. I want to be able to, if somebody asks me why did things change, I want to be able to explain it. Somebody's giving me a number that is, different than what I'm seeing and I can't explain it. I feel very uncomfortable about that. And so go ahead.
So I guess, Ryan, wouldn't it be almost like a control number? You know what I mean? I'm not trying to give you.
I'm loving this.
I'm not trying to give you two jobs because already you're working too much. But wouldn't it be interesting to kind of have your numbers and then have what you're being given and see what and if there's a difference, be able to have a dialogue with SGC or Beckett and say, hey, my numbers showed this. The numbers you gave me showed this, this, and this. Historical is a different story. I get it. Pre-2021 or whatever it is when you started, you'd almost have to rely on their data, which you don't want to do. Maybe, for historical pre-2021, you'd have to put a little disclaimer. This is all data that's straight from the company or whatever it is. But I would think on a going forward basis, pulling that API and having that as kind of like a balance and then being able to have a dialogue with PSA where they say, no, our number's not showing what you're showing. I would think that's good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the camp that more data is better. I won't let that sort of supersede the data that I publish.
Right. You won't use it by itself. Right.
I think also begs the question of why are there discrepancies? And if you
so it's timing, right? So when things hit the pop report versus when things ship are different. So even right now, PSA reports different numbers, SGC reports different numbers than what they see internally. They just have a different way of accounting for it, which is fine. Again, I don't care. I mean, that's fine by me as long as I sort of am consistently pulling the data and I know if either something's changed or has not changed and just is, temporarily sort of whatever. SGC had a day where they were training last week and they're just like, hey, our numbers are going to be a little low. So just be aware. And it's good for me to know because I'm like, oh, is the data broken? Do I have to go look at, any of the pipelines that we've built and make sure that they're working properly. So I would like that data just to have it to corroborate.
And how'd you know they were training?
They told me.
That's a good thing.
Totally. No, it's a great thing.
Right.
I love it. I want to have good relationships. Graders, I want to be friendly with the graders in the sense of I'm telling a lot of the stories here and I'm helping just bring more light and transparency to the hobby. I don't want to, steal their thunder or do anything in that sense. Or sort of tell a different narrative. I'm just telling what the numbers are published and sort of in aggregate look like.
And guys, look at Ryan's page. Even though he has, immediate access to, okay, this card just got graded and it's a whopper, right? He didn't go out there and front run the triple logo man being graded as authentic, right? Like, even though he's on it and he knows when something's grading and he's on it. He wakes up and it's like, let's see what was graded today. Let's see what changed. He didn't go post and beat PSA to the punch on that. SGC graded something last week, a cool vintage card. Ryan's not posting it on his own page saying, haha, look what SGC just graded. Like, that's not the goal, right? So I could see if you were doing that, looking at you with kind of like one of these sideways, kind of like, well, don't give him any data. Look what he's trying to do here. But
I want to I want to share how I use Gemry because I do think it will help people. So like 6 days ago, there was a great post. It was PSA total graded by category. And I love using PSA because they do grade right now the bulk of the cards. So for data, you need more data, the better. And if you need to go get another Coke, I know my co-host totally.
I'm in the Coke Zero camp, 100%.
Coke Zero camp, good.
There it is. Salute.
Mine's bigger than yours.
These guys are
no comment.
Kareem 8.5 vibes again. Okay, I thought we're past that. No big deal. But
look, I'm using a little cup though. See, it's a little cup.
Feel better. That makes
little
me feel
cup.
better.
I'm using a little cup.
So this is how I use Gemry, and I love this like as a buyer and a seller. So let's say you're holding soccer cards, right? Soccer cards kind of peaked in August 2020 to December 2021, to December 2020, maybe January 2021. But if you look at soccer cards, had 180% growth year over year, right? So to me, that makes me think is, wait, so PSA is grading more soccer cards. They're eventually going to hit the market. Supply is going to go up, and even if demand goes up, demand's not going to go up 200%. Even if I'm holding the best players, I should account for that. Either hold soccer for 10 years, or this might be the best time to sell soccer retroactively, like to when this came out. Am I thinking of things the right way?
Totally. And I can't wait for the day that this is more real time too, and is reflective of what's actually happening versus retelling the past, right? So yes, that's exactly one of the ways. It's probably the most common way people use Gemry, which is just to know like where's the market going to be flooded and can I get ahead of it? I'm trying to make this data as actionable as possible. It's not, a lot of times it's interesting. Population data tends to fall in it's interesting, but not necessarily actionable bucket a lot of times. And I'm trying to move it from that to being.
When it's going to become actionable? You have a universal pop report. For PSA's been closed, right? And they're opening up now. But we've had an entire season and a half worth of games, releases, you name it, while PSA was closed. So you're not going to have an apples to apples comparison of 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 Prism, rookie classes, you name it, right? So a universal pop report is going to allow you to go a little layer deeper into comparing the pop reports of a LaMelo Prism versus a Zion Prism, right? Versus a Luka. Because right now you look at it and say, okay, LaMelo and Edwards, their pop is tiny. Those pop 10s, those are great cards because of pop 10s. But I'll bet you Universal Pop Report is going to show more SGCs, more BGSs, more all the other grading companies for those cards because people didn't have the option really to send, especially the base, to PSA or anything to PSA. So the Universal, Pop Report is going to be able to I'm going to be the seller on this card, and I'm going to say, wow, come on, you got to pay more for a LaMelo than for a Ja. It's just 1/10 of the population, even though Ja's better. All right, well, as the buyer, now I'm going to pull up Gemry, and I'm going to say, well, yeah, but look, there's 3 SGC Ja's, and there's 3,000 SGC LaMelos. So it's not as rare as you say it is. It's a tool, right? It's helpful. And it will play large now because of what we've seen in the grading landscape.
Absolutely. Yeah. The sort of more fractional or sort of fractionalized or sort of fragmented the markets become, the more important this is there's sort of the more this needs to exist. So I've been excited about that part of it. It's painful as a consumer right now without it existing, but yeah, I think it has to exist in that, under those circumstances. I also even like it just from simply navigating PSA's story or a different grader's story over time too, because I think, you can I like looking at all the kabooms over time, all the downtowns over time, all, these things all sort of are subject to the nuance and context of the hobby as well. So it's graders, it's dependent. You can look at and sort of evaluate it across graders. You can look at it within the context of a single grader, but yes, agreed. Same page.
Is it fair to say, like in simplicity, right? So, and I'm not an economist, I didn't go to Keynesian school, I'm not Saylor or any of those guys, but it's just a game of supply and demand. And what we're doing here is isolating supply. We're getting as much clarity on the supply side of this game so that we can go and figure out demand and understand, that side. But we only have to solve for one variable because we go to gem rate and we know supply, real supply, not what I've been known to say is kind of maybe manipulated supply.
Totally. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, think of all the cool ways you could slice the data. And I hope I'm not giving Ryan now too many, things that aren't part
too many
of
projects.
Because if they're not,
bring it.
But I mean, like kabooms. You brought up the
you do that
example.
to me on a Monday morning when we brainstorm, and we're able to
He
handle
hates
it.
Mondays.
If I have a feeling, I think Ryan can handle it.
But think about kabooms for a second, or anything else, right? Like I would love the data on total graded kabooms in 2012, 2013, 2014, like the different years, because they're not numbered. Right?
Totally.
Numbered cards is a different story, right? Like if you look at the LeBron 2003 exquisite RPA, right? The PSA pop is very small. And you think to yourself, wow, there's only like 10 of these or maybe even less in PSA grades. The pop is tiny. Well, that's because, believe it or not, even though there's like 99 of them, there's 101 graded in BGS, right? So, I mean, that's part of the fun little story too about how things get cracked and regraded, and that skews the data. But I would love a chart that says kabooms over time. And to see if the bar chart is okay. Well, there's only like 10 curries from this year. Then there's 20. Then there's 50. Now last year there's 5,000 curry. It would be important for people to see that. It's a nice easy chart by a class of cards, by a type of cards, or by an individual card, whether it's your downtowns or anything like that. I think it's just a useful tool to tell a story. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you could do that, but that would be great.
Yeah, I actually have. That's the only one. I have this concept of like a report or a list, and at some point, I'm just gonna solicit and do like office hours and just be like, "What do you want to see?" and then start to publish these things, which is just like, what is interesting to you? What would you like to see over time? In ways that you can't just use today's pop reports to sort of experience. And yeah, so all that stuff is very viable today and feasible. It's just a matter of sort of aggregating what people want and just spending the time building it out. So, but yes, that's one of my favorite things. I do it. I'm actually collecting the 2014 Kaboom set because it's so underappreciated relative to the rest of them, and it's impossible to find. It was a Target only SKU.
What was that? Innovation or what was it?
It was Excalibur.
Excalibur.
Yeah,
right?
It was one in every 2 cases. There's so few of these things out there, and I just find them. And it's not my favorite design, but I just think they're like there's a really good story behind it. And they're just hard to come by. So I like collecting them. But yes, it's like there's a million of those stories in this hobby. Like as I get into like vintage and all this stuff, and I'm trying to sort of reconcile the different ways that people are naming sets back then, I'm like, oh my God, because I have no context for sort of awareness of like what was happening back then. It's crazy. There's just all these nooks and crannies in the hobby. And so this data starts to lend itself to just like navigating and going down these sort of rabbit holes. And it's fun, but you can definitely find like a lot of pockets where it's just underappreciated. The market wasn't as sort of frothy as it has been the past couple of years. And you can find some really cool angles. I mean, you still have to find cards that people care about at the end of the day, right? It's not just them being rare. We always talk about that stuff, but there's a lot of really interesting themes that sort of just don't get a lot of attention yet.
Scarcity is defined as rarity with demand.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Where demand exceeds the supply, I guess is maybe another way to word that. I'm curious. If we go back, so 2021, you're into the hobby, you're breaking cards, all that stuff. You're sending them to PSA. Then you're like, wait, we need a better tool. So you create gem rate, you start working on that. What are some of your big buys? Like, what are some of your okay, so Kaboom 2014.
Don't give away your best stuff, right? If you're still trying to track stuff down,
look, hey,
you don't need competitors, But
the reality is, gem rate is my PC these days, right? I mean, it's just all bootstrapped right now. I didn't want to raise on this venture because, candidly, I thought cards were getting overcapitalized. Like I just thought there was too much money coming into it, for a market that I thought people were thinking was going to be bigger than it was, at least at that time, right? And so I just didn't want to, and I also wanted to sort of, my time frame is my advantage in a lot of ways. Like I'm not subject to venture timing and expectations. I can sort of roll these things out as I want and need, and as sort of the consumers call for it.
You have to answer to the community, not to your investors.
Exactly, and that's
important.
It's exciting to me because and I most of the time I'm still just solving my own problems, but then I sort of hear things will bubble up and I'll solve them. But I jumped in. I'm a big Cleveland fan, so I'm a big Lindor guy. So I was big on Lindor cards. I thought he was underappreciated. He
got a huge Baker Mayfield collection.
Oh, thank God I did
Baker's
not.
Terrible.
And I can't talk about the Browns today. They're just too polarizing. And I'm not going to venture into Bron territory. I'm no Bron truther. But so I mean, like, I find I actually really like the 2013 timeframe, and I'm like actually collecting a lot of Giannis because I think like he's going to go down that same trajectory of LeBron and Steph. And so it's like, what can I find in the 2013, 2014, 2015 case hit era, area that's not being evaluated?
Well, now I know why Andrew brought you on. It has nothing to do with data.
We did not know that we were.
He finally found the Giannis.
Are we bidding against each other on
no? I mean, I have never met a Giannis collector.
I got bought out by Skim. I got bought out by Cage.
So that's the stuff I like, because I try to think about like what could be, what have we seen play out that could play out again with a different player. I'm big actually on sets. Like, what could, not to be too cliche here with like what's the next PMG, but just like what are things that if you reverse engineer like why people like or PMGs, like what could sort of exhibit some of those characteristics. And so I just like to look at those things and sets.
Is 2012 Prism that lead you to 2012 Prism like a lot of people believe?
Not necessarily. I mean, I get why. I think gold is now too frothy of a market, and so I'm not really venturing down that path. But I just find like actually one of my favorite things to do is just go on YouTube and watch like 2013, 2014 cases be opened of like all this stuff that isn't in the market anymore, because that's what PMGs weren't in the market very long. A lot of these sets that were created in 2013, 2014 had 2-3 year runs and then went off the market, but they're actually pretty cool. They just didn't have momentum when the market was kind of tame back then. So I like just looking at that stuff. It's like it's cool for me to see. Then it also just gives me the backdrop of like, why the hell are there 3 of these graded over the last 9 years when it's actually like a really cool card? Was it just that it was actually 1 per pack and so it wasn't that scarce, or wasn't that rare, and it also wasn't appreciated? Or is it these things that just the market overlooked because there was noise, or it just wasn't there wasn't as much demand or sort of attention being paid to the hobby back then?
TC, are you a Pokemon guy as well?
I'm not. I mean, it's actually a nightmare for me now because I'm trying to sort of quickly get up to speed on like all the different things that are happening in that space. Because I want to actually, Gemrate gets hit a ton for TCG because a lot of people dismiss it in the sites they build out, and so a lot of people like what we're doing for the TCG data. And so I'm trying to also bring together universal pop that extends to that as well. But it's much more complicated because I just don't know that market as nearly as well.
And there's a lot. There's a lot. The modern. There's a lot of new stuff that comes out too.
Tons. Yeah. It's a bit of a headache, but it's cool. I mean, look, Gemrate today is only sort of cards, but I built this so it could extend to other places too. It could extend to comic books. It could extend. WADA could be on there if we wanted it. It's not built only for cards, but that's only my focus at this stage.
Did you add like ticket stubs and all that stuff? Or
tickets are on there. Yeah, tickets are on there.
Where do you stand on tickets? Do you think they're a good investment long term?
I think they're interesting for sure. I think it's I think like even when you look at like the logo man LeBron, I think one of the things that people misunderstand with it is like it is a consolidated view. Like you can go buy jerseys, sure, but jerseys are not standardized. Like you can go in the market and they look different. They're signed differently. The context is different. They're photo matched. They're not photo matched. When you go and look at Logo Man, you know what you're buying into, and everybody knows what they're buying into there. And so there's demand for it. It's like an aggregation. It's like bringing together that focus into a single item where everybody sort of knows where it stands, and therefore it brings a little bit more demand behind it. I think tickets have some of that same feel to it in the sense of like they're very valuable, but it's very hard to navigate. The standardization is not there. They're graded, which is great, and it sort of provides a market and some authority over them, but it's still pretty hard to navigate and know like where the value is. And there's also, it's not that different than what we're seeing. Like TCG is the most graded category right now because everybody jumped into it. And it's like they didn't know it was junk wax. Like we knew when we found our cards in our basement 2 years ago. It's like, of course it's junk wax, right? People had heard for a year and a half that Pokemon was going crazy, and so they're grading it, right? But now there's so many Pokemon cards being graded that it's it's essentially junk for a lot of these. The most graded card is this Charizard from 2020 or whatever that is 25,000 gems and almost 50,000 graded, and it's like far and away the most graded card. And it's all just because like everything gets sent in now. And I think tickets could venture not down that path at all with the same sort of like velocity, but like, things could get unearthed. There could be more tickets that show up in the market. So I think you have to be careful. I think tickets have some, the rarity there, and I think there could be demand for them, but it's a little bit hard to navigate. A marketplace needs to better sort of exist to better surface them. And then you also just have to be aware that the population could like increase significantly on these things.
Something you said in the beginning of the episode I want to come back to is, in this market, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not going to say this perfectly, but like the way the hobby is built right now is for sellers because the auction houses could choose to use this pop but not the entire universal pop, and they could say, okay, there's only 3 of these cards. do you think true hobbyists, the people who control the hobby, who run the hobby, whatever you want to say, don't love NFTs and digital collectibles is because of the transparency that comes along with that? Like, if forget NFTs even for a second, we go to Panini Direct and look at their stuff, you know the supply. You know how many kabooms are out there. You know how many prisms are out there. You know how many blue circles are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And now that transparency puts a little bit more opportunity back into the buyer's hands.
I think that's fair. I think that's partially in play there. I mean, I definitely think, again, I think what you said is what I was articulating, in that I think that there's, this is a lot of the seller's perspective today, the way things are communicated. And I think it should shift to the buyer's perspective at certain points. I don't know if that's directly what's impacting NFTs. I mean, I follow that market pretty closely, and I do like I've gotten into the Panini ones a little bit, and, I'm also in the NFT world very, very lightly at this stage, but have paid attention to it.
What was your first one? What was your first buy?
Well, so I actually talked to the Zed team a bunch. And so I was
Zed horses.
Yeah. I talked to them at one point. So I have a Zed horse.
Run.
Yeah.
I like the concept because it's an NFT with utility that you could actually race and make money on.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just,
art,
which is the feedback, that you get so often.
Stud.
Yeah,
you're a stud.
Make
you're
your horses,
stud.
man. I look at you. I think stud. That's the only one that comes to mind.
Oh, man.
But yeah, Zed horses. That's
Cage is struggling to intertwine movie quotes into a data episode.
That would be
great. I do, just to close the loop on that though, I don't know the answer on the NFT side. I just think that, we have a lot of, it's the new age of get off my lawn. And I think that's the reality of it. And I think, look, I mean, I'm big fans of the guys at Card Ladder. I'm big fans of a lot of the teams in the space. And I just think people are protective of it. And I think that's okay. But I also think you have to be rational and open-minded about a lot of these things. And so I think that's where you have to sort of just the biggest thing I try to do is be where could I be wrong? And I think that there could stand to be more of that in this hobby. And so I think that's sort of an exciting exercise that we could do more of. I think NFTs stand in that. There's no doubt Beckett's going into it, PSA is going into it. They're going to be part of the story. I love it from a population standpoint because there's proof of ownership. There's a ledger that better keeps track of these things. So I think it stands to benefit from that. My biggest headache is just where is the duplication of pop reports right now? And I can't answer that. And, the grading companies themselves can barely answer that.
Duplication of pop.
Just cracking and regrading. And,
Gotcha.
Cracking.
Cards that have been sent in 3 times the PSA, then, made their way to
the
BGS.
Soto that I have, dude, that the flip stock that there's only 5 of, but there's 8 graded in PSA, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
It's a nightmare.
Interesting. So we had Eric Myers on, and he talked about the Black Label Kobe 1996 Topps Chrome Refractor. That card was bumped 50 times. Sent into. Remember this, Cage?
Well, it was sent in to bump. If it was bumped 50 times, it was started at
I apologize. It was sent in to bump 50.
And then bumped to a 2. Then
does
a 3,
that hit the pop
3.5
report every single time? Does that hit the pop report every single time?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's ways that you can get them removed if you send in the certs and things. But most people don't do that. I mean, people will do it on occasion if it probably benefits them. But generally speaking, they're probably not doing that. Yeah, I mean, it's a nightmare.
Where's home for you now?
I'm in Brooklyn. I work out
in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
How was New York during COVID?
Oh man, I caught it in March of 2020, so it was freedom. I was the only one on the streets. I had immunity. I felt like a superhero, just sort of on my scooter out here, a 40-year-old riding around on a scooter, in the streets of New York, so streets of Brooklyn.
That's crazy. I was living in Brooklyn in March of 2022. I bounced out though. We went to Mexico.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Best pizza place in Brooklyn, and why is it L&B Spumoni Gardens?
What? I'd never been.
Oh my God! What part of Brooklyn are you in? L&B Spumoni Gardens.
Is it Williamsburg?
Yeah, I won't say Williamsburg.
Is it Williamsburg?
Is that right?
Yeah.
All right.
Williamsburg's the best part.
That's okay. I'm too old for Williamsburg.
I mean, Grimaldi's is closed. Did you ever get there? I don't know how long you've been.
I did. It's too touristy for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I used to go before.
I actually really like Detroit style, so I'm big on Emmy Squared and all these other places.
But L&B is a square. It's
what it
Sicilian.
is?
Yeah. It's like a Brooklyn Square pizza. Trust me, give it a shot and get some Spumoni.
Sign me up. Yeah, sign me up.
Get some Spumoni. How about a roast beef sandwich? Avenue U, Bedford Avenue. I forget what it is. Avenue, Kings Highway, maybe. Brennan
roast
and Carr.
This isn't the
Brennan
80s,
and
Cage.
Carr. Check that. I'm telling you, it's worth it. Take your scooter over. You know, give yourself a
Well,
nice little ride.
my scooter got ripped off for the streets of Brooklyn 3 weeks ago.
What the hell is this? Come on, people. Well, we'll send you another scooter. Or I'll
You mean like you mean it was locked and someone cut it?
Yeah, my commutes are shorter these days.
Ugh, that's miserable. That's terrible. I hate that shit.
I've only had my bike stolen once, but it really is a terrible feeling because not only do you feel like someone stole something from you, now you're inconvenienced because you got to fucking walk.
Yeah, I can't.
So
And
you don't want to buy another one. It's like you feel like it's going to get stolen again.
It was a great cheat code, but yeah, I haven't anteed up to get another one yet.
BMX bikes were huge when I was a kid in the 80s. Rad, you all know, it shaped my childhood.
Dave Mira.
BMX bikes, right?
Dave Mira was.
I mean, he was good, but he wasn't in Rad. You know, but he probably should have been. Yeah, but I think he came after. But anyway, BMX bikes, kids on my area, my block, my neighborhood, they had, Mongoose, Dino. My parents bought me a bike at Price Club. It was called a Kent, which I'm sure is a fine bike, but it was not one that anybody wanted to steal. Like, I didn't mind parking my bike outside the store or the movie theater with my friends because I knew of all the bikes, mine was going to get stolen last.
Well, you took the seat off. You took the seat off. You kind of like that.
Yeah, rode with no seat. Exactly. Is that what you're trying to say? Weirdo. No, I mean, listen, it was a cheap bike. It is what it is. But it did the tricks. I could spin on the handlebars. I had pegs on. I could bounce all over.
Pegs were the jam back in the 80s.
Pegs, dice on the tires, and where the air thing was. I had it all.
I asked this
chrome pegs. I could never get the chrome pegs. My parents were not into buying those for us.
What about what were those called? The little chromies? Remember we used to take those off cars? You guys do that?
Yeah, people stole the hood ornaments off of my hood ornaments. Is what you're talking about, right? The front of the cars. People used to do that in the 80s. That was a big thing. They became keychains. You take the Jaguar off the front of the car, or like the I hated that. Somebody stole that off my parents' car. It was a Chrysler. What do you want a Chrysler for? A Chrysler thing? It's just like a little star. What are you taking that for? Now, if you had the balls enough to climb up on a Mack truck and take the Mack Bulldog, then you were a tough guy.
Right. What is you've obviously had a successful business career, right? You have a lot more in the tank. Like, what would you? Are you someone just like you're having fun? Like, this is a blast. I love the hobby. What does the next 5 to 10 years look like in a perfect case scenario for what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. I mean, it's a great question. I'm very big on that's one of the reasons I'm sort of pacing myself on this. Is this is some combination of a lifestyle business, but I also think it could reach a pretty meaningful scale. There's things we haven't talked about yet that are on my radar that I'm excited about, but there's a lot of my roadmap, but as an individual, I can't get there. So building out a team is something I'm considering still. What does that look like? Do I take on sort of a smaller investment round that's not venture backed, or venture based that sort of can provide some fuel to this? I've thought about accelerators. Bigger picture though, I just love it. This is fulfilling for me. It's hard stuff. And it's like, I get to look at, eBay and cards all day and sort of, it's just so fun. I tell, it's hard. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh shit, what do I have to deal with today? But it's always a good problem. It's always exciting. And so that's where you want to get, where it's it's just, I work on my hobby all day. So it's fun. It's so to the degree that I can do that and maybe sneak in a few rounds of golf during the week eventually, 5, 10 years from now, that's awesome. But it's really just how can I provide value in a way that, is fulfilling some of my goals, but also solving some of the problems I have in the market and solves broader problems in the market too. And that's sort of what Gemrate's servicing.
Listen, all the offers coming in on the podcast, Andrew finally lets me accept one of them. I mean, he's just rejecting them all. And, I guess he wants to be even richer. But one of those, when we accept one day, I already know what I'm going to do. And no one steal this. No one will steal this. Just like you're doing the data for the cards, I think you already got that. I would have done that, but you've got that area. I want to taste test Popeyes versus Chick-fil-A every day, and then report on whether or not which one tasted better on any given on a Tuesday. Chick-fil-A tastes better than the Popeyes chicken sandwich. Is the Burger King? I'm going to do that every day.
It's your smoothie consistency test, productionized, right?
You're just doing it. And then I'll put the data out there. Guess what?
Market.
For the 32nd straight day, Chick-fil-A tasted great.
I'm a Chick-fil-A, truther there too. So, sign me up for that venture. I'll support you on that one.
One of the things that you could do, and I'm sure you've thought about, is with a paid model, you can, all right, so we have the data looking backwards, but we can also forecast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forecasting is
print runs and things like that are on my radar too, or just total pop. Like not everything. It doesn't work perfectly, but like base rates. Somebody had brought. There was a gentleman in the market that had done some work on this a couple of years ago that I thought was really interesting. Base rates are really interesting. So like, how many times are you going to see a base card before you see a silver, or one of these other unnumbered cards like a tiger stripe or something like that, right? Like, I'm starting to put some print run numbers and estimates out there for sure on the radar. It's just a matter of like, the thing I have the hardest problem with still is like, I've been unable to sort of like phase things where I'm just like testing out a set or testing out a year. Like I'm trying to do things in really broad strokes right now and trying to think about like, okay, maybe I should just do it for 2019 basketball and see what happens, right? I'm sort of cautious about like if I can also ultimately like play that out and do this for some other historical sets that I don't really know very well. So I've sort of been hesitant to sort of like leap into that, full steam ahead. But yes, very much on my radar. Just not, I haven't figured out exactly like where I phase that in. But I do think, I've talked to others about like, just where to publish it and also sort of like how to bring that to market. But the actual data is there. It's just a matter of like, putting some science to it.
There you go.
I think another thing that you could do, and I think this is out of the book of Skim, is content play, right? Like to add a little bit of color on top of all the data.
Yeah, so right now that's what I'm doing, and it's so painful for me. I'm not a writer. It's like these monthly reports, they get a lot of traction, so I like doing them from that sense, and it does provide like good context for the hobby. But it's painful. It takes me a half hour to write an email. It's just not my jam.
It takes me a half hour to read one.
You don't read them. More than one sentence.
Stop sending me too long to read messages.
One of my dreams, and you start to see some of it though, is like these YouTube channels are picking up my content and starting to run with it. Like I want this database to be available. Like there's certain things here that I want open source or just like make generally available because people have questions that I haven't thought of. They have context that I'm not aware of, like all this different stuff that I don't know yet, or sort of just can't sort of like put into a problem and sort of a set of questions that I want to answer. And like, I want everybody to be able to answer these things. Right now, I'm sort of the only source right now, and it's sort of a bottleneck, but I get a lot of great questions and I'm just like, shit, I can't get to it yet. So ideally I start to open a lot of this up, and I'm happy to do some of the content, but I'd like it just to be a content engine. Cause I just think like it's very rich. Like there's so much stuff in here that I haven't even touched on that could be told. It's just a matter of sort of like giving the hobby the tools to do it in a way that people feel confident, and it's high quality data.
All right, tell everybody, Andrew, or Ryan, you could tell her where can they go find you? Where do they look you up? Where how do they get your emails? What's the story? Let's go.
Yeah. It's pretty simple. It's just GemRate on Instagram or on Twitter. We have a decent following there. I'm not really doing anything on Facebook yet. We have a website where we put the daily dashboard out, which is trying to just shed some light on how the graders are doing on a daily basis. You can see the all-time list of like top cards graded by each grader, and you can categorize it, cut it and slice it by sport, by category. You can view the top 100, 1,000, all these things. You can go to gemrate.com though, and there's a newsletter. That's probably the easiest way to sort of just sign up and stay up to date on what we're doing. And then when we release this universal pop soon, you'll be one of the first to know if you're on that list. So, and if you're on that list too, we're trying to sort of provide access ahead of time too, to sort of like beta test some of this stuff too. So jump on there if you want to get early access.
You just made the list, pal.
Here we are 58 minutes in. I want to say one more thing on Marvel cards, but like, guys, we really do. We work every single day. This week I've been traveling a lot, but like I bring on guests, one that I want to learn from, but most importantly is that I know it's going to benefit you guys, right? I don't want to waste your guys' time. You guys out there who've been with us from day one know value. We want to deliver value to our community. How often do you get a service that's free of charge that gives you all of this data? Here you go, spoon-fed to you, and allows you to make better buying decisions. Allows you to understand the market better. Allows you to put color or specificity to some of the things that you're feeling and thinking about in the market. I think it's a no-brainer. It's GemRate. It's super easy. GEMRATE on Instagram, gemrate.com. Is that I spell that right, Cage?
No, I thought you were going to end with Gem Rat, and I was like, what are you doing in this guy's business?
Gem Rat.
I could probably pick that handle up if I have to.
So what are you? There's an E coming, folks.
1990 Marvel, I have a theory. Okay? It's just a theory. So what made the first edition PSA 10 Pokemon set so iconic? I heard at one point they were selling like the boxes for like $80 at Target, right? In 1999.
Probably not the first edition.
No, I heard first edition 1999. But what I understood is they were the PSA 10 top of the Zard is how many, Cage?
I think it's like 120 something, 129, something like that. 120 something.
129.
121.
Relatively low.
Like
And I mean, you got Chansey, who's also super low. Remember, you used to get DMs for your
That's
Chansey.
lower, significantly lower, like 40 something of that. Yeah.
I think the 1990 Marvel set, I think PSA recognizes that this could become iconic set. Marvel's huge brand, Disney brand, all that stuff. And I think they realized when it caught on, when we did our break in March 2021, that if they just start giving out 10s on all this stuff, they'll kill the market before it even becomes a market. And I think that's could be part of the reason. And I always talk about PSA as a grader, but a market maker, and not in a bad sense. They want this to be an iconic set. They have to be very cautious out the gate of how many cards they truly give Gen 10. I want to hear your rebuttal and poke holes in that. Tell me I'm an idiot. I'm curious what you think about it.
I look, I've heard you talk about sort of them as market makers for a while. And I think look, I don't know that they're ever telling their team to do these things, right? But I think there's probably an understanding of look, there's certain things if you know, and I think there's certain things where it's just look, just be a little bit more cautious on these, give them, if you do the math, they're spending a minute per card, and that's on a lot of cards these days, right? So they're not spending a lot of time on these. Certain cards that probably get 2, 3 get flagged, and those are the ones that are probably more likely to get 9s, right? Like the more time they spend, there's probably some correlation of them getting a lower grade. And so I don't know that to be true, but I think there's certain sets that probably fall into that bucket.
I think there's certain sets, 5% that are higher standards. The standards for grading on those sets is higher than the others.
Yeah, you're probably. I would
know.
Yeah, I would look. Well, hopefully they start to be more. Well, I don't know.
I know this is opinion showcase.
I know. We'll never know. I mean, I like that. That's your opinion. I mean, look, the 81 Marvel cards that I sent in that were from 7 boxes that I broke and only took the 81 best cards. Well, that's not exactly true because there were some hollows there, and I don't expect 10s on hollows. That's impossible. But the non-hollow cards, I sent in my best, most centered, no surfaces for the whole deal. I didn't get a single 10. I've submitted before, and I got 10s. I have plenty of 10s, right? 9s, mostly 9s and 10s. This time I got a few 9s, mostly 7s and 8s. I'm like, what the hell?
But if we could be honest, and I mean, we do have a show, we talk about, maybe it sounds like we complain on it, but not being a complainer, it makes me want to go buy the PSA 10 of Stan Lee now. It wants me to go buy the PSA 10s. I said the next time a first edition Marvel set comes out, I think you should buy it.
Yeah. But I mean, the point that you're making there is 100% right, because I was thinking about buying some more 10s, maybe even completing a set like Geo is doing with an SGC 10 set. I was thinking about doing that, and I said to myself, you know what? I got a couple hundred of these cards sitting at PSA. I know I'm going to get a few 10s back, so I'm not going to start buying the set yet because I don't want to buy one, and then I got a 10 coming back. I still have more in future subs. I'm going to get all 8s and 7s. I can't do anything. Guys, I hope people want to come find me at the National because you're going to get rewarded with a PSA 7 Marvel card that should be a 10 or 9. So
I do think there's a disproportionate rate being awarded, but I think you're also right. There's a ton of these that people are sitting on, and they're probably aware of that. And they're just we're still going to get flooded with these potentially. So we just have to be harder on them. And so, the danger there is that you buy it, but the population still doubles because, there's still a ton of these things that people are sitting on. And it may not be exactly that, but, there's probably a ton of these things that are just floating around.
There will be more submitted because in 10 years, when it's back to $8 a card,
right,
I'm going to send all of these back and get 10s. So get ready for that.
It's not going to be $8 a card anymore, dude. Minimum wage is $66 an hour now.
Well, whatever it is by comparison because of inflation. But I'm not sending them in for 50. I'm not sending them in for 30. And I'm sure I'm not the only person out there. They're Marvel cards at some point, to get them in and to get the numbers they want to do because people are not sending in as many. They'll be back down to $12 or $15, whatever the heck it's going to be. And these cards are going right back.
So you've been super generous with your time. I got to ask you one last question. I think we've only had 2 people on from the Ohio area. I think it was Card Collector 2, Ryan.
Yep.
And you. Oh, Ryan.
Yep.
Great guy. You guys should connect, by the way.
Why? Because they have the same name?
And they're from the same area, actually. It's 2 things. The data. What is it? one thing is an outlier, two is a data point or something like that. You could draw a line through. I don't know.
You're never going to find
Michael-
a friend if that's
I
the
heard
rule
Michael
of friends.
Saylor say that once, and I tried to remember it. I could not. I'm an idiot.
I got to
Ryan,
find somebody else named
how do
Cage.
you-
I'm going to be alone
What do you think
forever.
about what's your as Ohio resident, Cleveland guy? I don't even know if you're from Cleveland. I think you are.
I am. Yeah, I'm Cleveland.
LeBron, are you? I'll leave it wide open, because he brought a championship to you guys, Cleveland native, but
Ryan, this is where you say he never made his team better and he never improved since high school.
I wanted to leave it open ended.
Yeah, no. Look, I listened to all it takes, right? And I don't want to go too long on this, but I'm grateful for a championship. I'm grateful. I was actually a bigger Kyrie fan. I thought he was even like at some points more of an alpha on that team. But he brings a blowtorch and he sort of manipulates the franchise in the process. So, it comes with the trade-off of, you're sort of in shambles. And so, he doesn't do you any favors when he's on the team. He's definitely like a me first narrative as it relates to like his career and his long-term prospects. And so, that you're willing to eat that though. Gilbert didn't like him on the way out, but he knew what he needed to do to get a championship. And so they both squashed their beef and moved past it and they got what they wanted out of it. So it's painful. I don't root for or against him at this stage. It's an impressive, career that he's put together. It's phenomenal. And it's crazy where he's at and where he's still going with it. So I'm grateful to sort of sit there and watch it. And grateful to I was at Game 7 downtown in Cleveland watching as we won with my dad on Father's Day, and it's like
wow, that's kind of cool.
They weren't even playing in Cleveland; they were in Golden State, but it was just amazing to be there downtown. That's there, and so very grateful for that. But it's he's frustrating as a sort of an outsider to watch and just sort of see he's got a lot of great things going for him, but he's tough as sort of just somebody to sort of operate around.
No, it's funny. Watching NBA Finals now, I have a very different take on LeBron. I'm warming to him. Obviously, I started buying some of his cards too. But I remember when I was a basketball fan in the 90s, Jordan was not universally loved the way that he is now. And it's amazing to kind of look back on these things. And it wasn't until he's done. And then a year goes by, 5 years go by, 10 years go by, and people were not doing what he did. Right. I remember in the 90s when people were like, wow, Olajuwon just won 2. He could be just as good as Jordan. He could be great. And then Jordan came back and then won 3 more. And you were like, okay, where the hell did Olajuwon go? You know what I mean? It was one of those kind of things, right? And then, he quit. He played baseball. He was kind of shitty at it. But then he quit. And you look back and now he's universally thought of as, wow, it's amazing. While LeBron was doing this, the warts are there. Kind of like Jordan with the gambling and Jordan with the golfing and Jordan with doing his own thing and being mean to his teammates. I think when LeBron is gone, we're going to miss him.
Oh, absolutely.
That's my take. You know what I mean? Like we're lucky to have been able to watch basketball, and it should be no surprise to anybody that the game has evolved and become the must-watch sporting event during the time that he has built it as that. Say what you want about the guy, say what you want about any of that. He's really shepherded the sport into what it is now. That's my take on it. I think he'll be appreciated even more when you don't see somebody get to the finals, for a decade in a row. You know what I mean? Right. For the next 30 years, no one's going to do that, right? So that's kind of, my take on LeBron.
I agree. And I think, maybe 10 years from now when politics sort of are aside from his sort of narrative, people look back only at his career and sort of the impact on the game. And it just becomes even more obvious, like the role that he's played and sort of where his standing is. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's crazy to just watch how this body of work, given the expectations that were set against this guy. So,
Garland or Sexton?
Oh, Garland for sure. I like Colin Sexton as like a dog. That guy works hard, but he's like LeVert. These guys don't know how to share the ball. They're sort of still they're not ideal for team play.
I don't think anyone can stay in front of Garland. Like he beats the first guy off the dribble.
I went to both playing games, and it was frustrating because he didn't look the same. He looked off in both games.
Was he a little bit banged up? And it was also...
I think he was a little banged up, and he looked a little bit off. He just didn't seem to have it. That's good, though. I really wanted to see them make the playoffs and sort of get, tested on that front. But, I like that they're sort of going against the trend here, going against the grain. So they're fun to watch in that sense.
They're going to be a good team in 3-4 years. And last question, I promise we'll let you go. Thank you for being so generous with your time.
No, I love this. This is great.
Griffin, you mentioned him, GM. He's now the GM of the Pelicans. Yeah. Do you think he figures it out with Zion?
Oh, man. I mean, look, I I give him the benefit of the doubt. He pulled off a pretty tough situation. They don't go into the behind the scenes in Cleveland there, what was happening, but it was not a great dynamic. And so he's he's seen adversity, and sort of dealt with it. And that team was like, the profile of that back then. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know Zion and Zion's story well enough to know, it comes down to him ultimately sort of buying in. I think what they did in the playoffs this year was really cool to see, without him. It would have been an amazing story if they did make it to that game 7 and he plays. I mean, like what a wild, high risk, but wild thing to have seen just from like a story standpoint. But I don't know. I mean, I hope he comes back and, they pull it all together because he's been great for this hobby and the energy around it. And like, it is unfortunate when you see, he plays into this story. Like the market being down is obviously macro, but there are micro stories in that, and Zion's a big part of that. And so I don't know. I like Griffin. I give him the benefit of the doubt. They gave up, they got a ton back. We'll see. I don't have a strong answer on that one.
No, it's good enough. It's a perfect answer. Everybody go check out Gem Rate.
100%. Ryan, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, guys. This was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening to another episode of Lucas, Tigers, and Bronzo My. I wanted to tell you about a new service that we have starting as of today, and I'm really, really excited to bring it to you guys. So, as a part of our partnership with SGC, we got 50 free submissions every single month, and many of you have taken advantage of that. And it's amazing that we could have the opportunity to 650 episodes, 675 episodes in, to go ahead and give back to our community. As people were sending those cards in, they asked, can we send 5, 10, 20 more cards to you guys? We'll pay for it, but we wanted them graded with SGC. You guys know SGC is turning cards around in 13 to 14 business days, have incredible customer service, and their secondary market values are going up day after day after day. And that's exciting for the hobby and exciting for the grading landscape. So we didn't want to just rush into it. We wanted to do it right. And what we did was I relocated here to Boca Raton, Florida. I opened up a P.O. box maybe 5 minutes away from SGC, and I will be hand delivering and hand picking up the cards. So you don't have to worry about anyone else touching your cards. It will be me, and I will update you every step of the way. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to personally pick up the cards from a P.O. box, prep them, new card saver, new penny sleeve, and deliver them to SGC every single Tuesday. Why Tuesday? Well, it lets the stragglers over the weekend come back through on Monday and gives me a day to prep, and it basically gives SGC the entire week to work on grading those cards. Once your cards pop, only then at the end of the process will you be paying for the service. It's $25 per card, simple as that, and the turnaround times have never been faster. We're hearing right now 13, 14, less than 20 business days. So there it is, 9170 Glades Road, number 135 is the P.O. Box in Boca Raton, Florida, 33434. 9170 Glades Road, number 135, Boca Raton, Florida, 33434. Of course, you could shoot me an email or shoot me a text anytime, and I'm always available. Many of you already have my email. It's iamandrewgoldberg@gmail.com, or my cell phone number, 215-519-9154. Reach out with any questions. I could walk you through the process. I've hopped on the call with quite a few of you, and I'm happy to do that. Love you, Luca Nation.